Okay, good morning again. This is part 2 of your week 1 instructions. Apologies that it's taking me a little bit longer. It won't normally be 2 parts. It's just getting all of those little bits of logistics sorted out for you. Okay, so where we got to with the last video was we were going through the overview of the week, and we got to the completing activities 1, 2, and 3 on this document, which is your week document. And you'll be discussing your responses and ideas regarding these activities as a class throughout the week when we have those more extended times in Zoom. So as you can see over here, I've tried to make it really easy so you can click in and out of them. Activity 1, Activity 2, and Activity 3. So let's have a look at what we've got here. Firstly, the big ideas. So we're looking at how narratives shape our world. And we're also looking at how our world is shaping narrative. So it's a really contextual-based unit. We're looking at those big ideas and how they're represented through texts and how texts have been impacted by particular things that are happening in our society at particular times. A Brave New World is a great example of that, looking at the scientific questions that it brings up, ethical nature of things. I think that there's just so much for us to discuss. I'm so excited to do that with you. So first, activity 1, big ideas. Choose one big idea from the list below, or you can pick one of your own. So you do that, explaining why it appealed to you, what questions you have about the idea. Find a narrative that you can use as an example. So you're finding a narrative that reflects that idea, and you're answering some questions based on that. Okay. Big ideas about narratives and how they shape the world. So you're answering these questions. What is the connection between narratives and identity? How does a narrative help to construct an identity? These are really big questions when we think about how narratives relate to shaping our world that we're going to discuss. Whose narratives are valued and what stories do they tell? What is privileged in a narrative? Why are we now aware of reading a diverse range of narratives? What can we learn from reading a diverse range of narratives? Who could decide what we read? Now, that's a really particularly interesting question, How do writers lead us to embrace broader ideas about humanity? What role do narratives play in shaping our understanding of the world? How are narratives vehicles for challenging our cultural practices? I'm not going to read through all of these, but as I read them, I'm just so excited to discuss them with you and look at what you've answered. So I want you to come prepared to be able to discuss these questions when we have our Zooms. And I'll talk more about that when we have our first one anyhow. And then if we move down into activity 2, okay, so we jump into activity 2. Analysing the big ideas. Now, this is an extension of that task. Find a section of text from the narrative you chose to illustrate in your big idea. So that activity 1, cut and paste it here. Okay. Outline the context of the author. What are some important events in the author's life? So this is now we're really getting into that depth of analysis and what we're doing in terms of analysing different texts. The reason for the narrative. Why has the narrative been written? Who is the intended audience? What effect did or does the narrative have? I'm not going to read all of them, but those questions are around analysis, okay? And then we move on to activity 3, which is analysing a Brave New World introduction. So we're starting our work on Brave New World this week. Towards the end of this week, I would be expecting you to be really engaging with it. So I want you to read through this text that I've pulled out there. Some of it's from the foreword of the actual text itself, okay? And then it says, take one of the oppositions that Postman, so that's who's written this analysis, describes in the paragraph quoted above. Write down the sentence or sentences that describe the opposition. Then think about the connections within our own world. What is your gut feeling about it? Is Orwell's vision or Huxley's vision more accurate? What kind of evidence would you see or would you need to convince someone one way or the other? How would you investigate this? So analysing what's been written here about the text, from the perspective of Orwell's narratives and also from Huxley's narratives, and answering those questions. So this is your work for this week. And again, we will be working through this together. We'll be having those touch bases at the beginning of every lesson, and then we have those 3 lessons over the next 2 weeks where we can discuss all of this in further depth, face-to-face, virtually. Have a fantastic week, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all.